Thank you, Leah. I think that she deserves a round of applause for all this organization that she's been doing. I'm just going to start off here. To many of us, Independence Day means a holiday. It means a time to be with friends and family at cookouts and baseball games or fireworks shows. We've been blessed to be able to do these things on our nation's birthday. Many times, however, many of us merely look at July the 4th as just another excuse to take a day off from work without actually reflecting on the sacrifices and the costs borne by those who have given us this exceptional country. Today, I'd like to provide a bit of historical context to the men who signed our founding document. I'm going to read a speech written by the father of a person viewed by many as a patriot, by some as a polarizing and controversial figure. Some of you may recognize this speech. I first heard it some time ago, but the profundity of it did not strike me until I actually sat down to read it. I'm purposely withholding the name of the author until the speech is finished, so that the words can resonate without any preconceptions of this author. The speech is entitled, "The Americans Who Risked Everything." It was a glorious morning. The sun was shining and the wind was from the southeast. Up especially early, a tall, bony, red-headed Virginian found time to buy a new thermometer, for which he paid £3 and 15 shillings. He also bought gloves for Martha, his wife, who was ill at home. Thomas Jefferson arrived early at the State House. The temperature was 72 degrees, and the horseflies weren't nearly so bad at that hour. It was a lovely room, very large, with gleaming white walls. The chairs were comfortable. Facing the single door were two brass fireplaces, but they would not be used today. The moment the door was shut, and it was always kept locked, the room became an oven. The tall windows were shut, so that loud quarreling voices could not be heard by passers-by. Small openings atop the windows allowed for a slight stir of air, and also a large number of horseflies. Jefferson records that the horseflies were dexterous in finding necks, and the silk of stockings was nothing to them. All discussing was punctuated by the slap of hands on necks. On the wall at the back, facing the president's desk, was a panoply. This consisted of a drum, swords, and banners seized from Fort Ticonderoga the previous year. Ethan Allen and Benedict Arnold had captured the place, shouting that they were taking it in the name of the great Jehovah and the Continental Congress. Now Congress got to work, promptly taking up an emergency measure about which there was discussion but no dissension. Resolved that an application be made to the Committee of Safety of Pennsylvania for a supply of flints for the troops at New York. Then Congress transformed itself into a committee of the whole. The Declaration of Independence was read aloud once more, and debate resumed. Though Jefferson was the best writer of them all, he had been somewhat verbose. Congress hacked the excess away. They did a good job, as a side-by-side comparison of the rough draft and the final text shows. They cut the phrase by self-assumed power. Climb was replaced with must read, then must was eliminated, then the whole sentence, and soon the whole paragraph was cut. Jefferson groaned as they continued what he later called their depredations. Inherent and unalienable rights came out certain unalienable rights, and to this day, no one knows who suggested the elegant change. A total of 86 alterations were made. Almost 500 words were eliminated, leaving 1,337. At last, after 3 days of wrangling, the document was put to a vote. Here in this hall, Patrick Henry had once thundered, "I am no longer a Virginian, sir, but an American." But today, the loud, sometimes bitter argument stilled, and without fanfare, the vote was taken from north to south by colonies, as was the custom. On July the 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was adopted. There were no trumpets blown. No one stood on his chair and cheered. The afternoon was waning, and Congress had no thought of delaying the full calendar of routine business on its hands. For several hours, they worked on many other problems before adjourning for the day. So what kind of men were the 56 signers who adopted the Declaration of Independence, and who, by their signing, committed an act of treason against the Crown? To each of you, the names Franklin, Adams, Hancock, and Jefferson are almost as familiar as household words. Most of us, however, know nothing of the other signers. Who were they, and what happened to them? I imagine that some of you are somewhat surprised at the names that are not there. George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Patrick Henry. All of these men were elsewhere. Ben Franklin was the only really old man. 18 were under 40. 3 were actually in their 20s. Of the 56, almost half, 24, were judges and lawyers. 11 were merchants. 9 were landowners and farmers. And the remaining 12 were doctors, ministers, and politicians. With only a few exceptions, such as Samuel Adams of Massachusetts, these were men of substantial property. All but 2 had families. The vast majority were men of education and standing in their communities. They had economic security, as few had in the 18th century. Each had more to lose from revolution than he had to gain by it. John Hancock, one of the richest men in America, already had a price of 500 pounds on his head. He signed in enormous letters so that His Majesty could now read his name without his spectacles and could double the reward. Ben Franklin, Riley noted, "Indeed, we must all hang together. Otherwise, we most assuredly shall hang separately." Fat Benjamin Harrison of Virginia told tiny Elbridge Gerry of Massachusetts, "With me, it will all be over in a minute. For you, you'll be dancing on air an hour after I'm gone." These men knew what they risked. The penalty for treason was death by hanging. And remember, a great British fleet was already at anchor in New York Harbor. They were sober men. There were no dreamy-eyed intellectuals or draft card burners here. They were far from hot-eyed fanatics yammering for an explosion. They simply asked for the status quo. It was change they resisted. It was equality with the mother country they desired. It was taxation with representation they sought. They were all conservatives, yet they rebelled. It was principle, not property, that brought these men to Philadelphia. 2 of them became presidents of the United States. 7 of them became state governors. 1 died in office as the vice president of the United States. Several would go on to become U.S. senators. 1, the richest man in America, in 1828 founded the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. 1, a delegate from Philadelphia, was the only real poet, musician, and philosopher of the signers.